Hello and welcome to another Creative Chit Chat. My name is Craig D'Souza. I'm the CEO and founder of the Creative Industry Association. And today I bring you a wonderful, wonderful friend. I really doesn't need any introduction, but Seth Apter. Hello and welcome to my latest Chit Chat. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks so much, Craig, for inviting me. I'm always up for talking to you. And it's been a long time since we've been able to cross paths in person and catch up. So this is great.
I know. Look at us embracing modern technology. I think you've probably done it far greater than I have. I know with your lives and your workshops and stuff like that, and we'll get onto those. But for the few that might not know of you, could you tell us who you are, how you got started? Because I think there's quite interesting stories of that. So tell us who you are and how you got started, please.
Okay, well, my name is Seth Apter, and I'm based in New York City, where I live. I'm sitting in my studio. You can see it in, part of it in the background right now. I have a long version and a short version of how I got started in art, so I'm going to stick with the short version. Basically, art came into my life later in life. I was not involved in art as a kid or as a young adult. And in fact, I had a completely different career. I was a psychologist, a full-time psychologist. And then I happened to meet an artist in a very happenstance, serendipitous way when I was traveling in Canada. And she was an owner of a gallery and the artist of some art in the gallery that I really loved. I purchased a few pieces of hers and went back home to my life. This was back in the year 2000. And a few weeks later, she mailed me a handmade postcard thanking me for buying the work. And I was just so kind of touched and overwhelmed that this artist sent me a handmade postcard, a little handmade piece, and thought so nicely of me to do that I decided I need to send her a handmade postcard back in kind. So I kind of copied her postcard, not knowing anything about making art, mailed it back to her, and she proceeded to continue to send me things that she made directed toward me. And we ended up in a probably 4 or 5 year mail art relationship, which I did not know at the time what that even was. And every time she sent me a piece, it was a little bit of an education to me. And I would look at the piece and say, oh, now I got to make a little book. Like, how did she make this little book? And it just pulled me into the world of art, so much so that it just became bigger and bigger and bigger, first as a hobby and an escape, and then ultimately as my full-time career, which is where I am now.
Oh wow! So I guess as a psychologist as well, you kind of see you probably really get the thought of that craft is connected to wellness and mindfulness. Obviously, it's quite big now, and these are big buzzwords that have just been over the last couple of years been more connected with craft. But obviously, did you see that before? Once you started, how it was calming, gave you an influence, gave you a different mindset.
Well, personally, for me, I did. My job was as a psychologist was an intense job. I worked primarily with medical rehabilitation clients. So it's people who had brain injuries and spinal cord injuries. And so I definitely needed a way to release some of the attention I was experiencing. And, you know, for me, I was a runner, and so I had running. But when I discovered the art was so therapeutic for me. It really allowed me to escape and lose myself and kind of settle myself. So I recognized very quickly for me how relevant that was. And then, although I never did art therapy per se, I knew a lot of art therapists and began to recognize the importance of what they did with the clients.
And so the transition from, because being a psychologist, you know, without being detrimental to any other job, seems a very grown-up job, and an adult job. Again, not being detrimental to any other job. Then to flip into craft, you know, I've been in the industry 20 years. Whenever I tell people I work in craft, I always get the kind of, "Oh, really? Are you playing with stuff?"
Yeah.
And it is 9 times out of 10. That's what it is. But to make it into a business is a very, very difficult thing to flip into, because you have to justify that.
Yeah.
Was that transition difficult, and how long did that take?
Well, I think the key word you said was transition, because for me, it was quite a long transition. Originally, when I was a psychologist, I worked in a hospital in New York City, and then I transitioned to private practice. So while I was in my private practice, I learned basically what I needed to know about having my own business and fending for myself per se. So that, first of all, made my transition to being a full-time artist easier, because I had already understood what goes into, paying for your own health insurance and not having a check coming guaranteed every 2 weeks and all of that. But what I did was I transitioned really for quite a long time. I was a full-time in my psych practice and doing so much in art just for myself. And then as it became more and more important to me, and it became a little bit more like a business, I started to reduce my time in my practice. And I was able to do that because it was my own practice. And I was able to do that because, many of us, I'm sure you guys watching, are in therapy, and you start and you stop therapy. So as people stopped being my clients in the natural way, it was time for them to move on. I began to fill the time with art rather than psych. So I went from 5 days and like weekends with art to 4 days and 3 days with art, and then 3 days and four days. And it just, over the course of quite a number of years, actually, it just transitioned till I knew that I was ready to make the switch full time.
Oh, fantastic. And how long have you been doing that now full time? How long have you been doing this full time now?
I'm going to say probably, in terms of no psych at all, probably about 3 years.
Wow. Well, that comes as a big shock to me personally, because I think we've known each other for maybe 10, 15 years, I think,
Yeah.
for the creativation shows and CHA
Yes.
shows. So that's an interesting. So those times I've met you prior to that were those transition times then, I guess.
Yes, I was still the shrink. Um,
Wow.
it was probably about 5 years or 4 years, I would say, 4 or 5 years, that I had basically one day of psych. I was not feeling ready for the longest time. I would set a date and say, you know what, if I want to transition in January of this year, then I need to think about making changes now, which might have been, 8 months before. And I would say, I'm not quite ready. I'm not quite ready. And at the same time, even though I was still working in psych, I really was full time in art, because I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
teaching and I was traveling and I was in the business of it. But it wasn't really until I think it was 2018 where I said, you know what, it's time just to make
Yeah.
the change completely.
Fantastic. And we're so pleased you did make that transition full time, because now you're not just an artist. You've got product, you've got paint, you've got what? Can you list the stuff that you do now? What stuff are you getting involved in?
I'm involved in a lot of areas of art and craft. So, um, in no particular order, I make art and I sell art. I exhibit art when I can at different shows and galleries. I design products, and I've chosen the route to design products with many smaller companies rather than design everything with one larger company. So I have lines of paints and inks and stencils and stamps and embossing powders and more, with lots of companies. I teach. Prior to the pandemic, I would say that was probably the largest portion of my income, because I am a person who loves to travel. And if, to me, I found the key to the universe, I was able to travel and teach. So I would travel year round everywhere a lot of time. And then at that point in time, I taught on occasion online, but actually very rarely. For me, it was all about in person. Um, and then I also have my own online shop where I sell my own products, but I also sell a kind of a wide range of select other products from designers and other companies as well. So it's a lot, but I will tell you that when I decided to transfer from being a psychologist to a full-time artist, living in New York City, where, most people know the rent is not low, I knew that I had to do it for me, because the person I am, I needed to be smart about it. So for me, the key was multiple streams of income. This is actually, you know, you didn't really say like, can you give advice, but this is my advice to people who are starting out. Um, for me, I made a relatively speaking easy, although big transition during the pandemic, because even though I lost the portion that was my largest section of income, the teaching, traveling and teaching, because I had all these other aspects. I had my online shop, I have my products, which means I have royalties, I have my art that I sell. I was able to really make a, relatively speaking, seamless transition to not traveling anywhere. So I think that that's really important that you think about that. You oughtn't just do one thing, because if anything happens to that one thing, as an artist, you are sunk.
Yeah, agreed. I thought, funny enough, and most members that know, I always talk about the power of four. And the power of four is just four things. Always have four things. So in case of something goes wrong, you've at least got something else coming up. Five is great because then you've got 20% of something, right?
Right.
So it's always good. But that's fantastic, and you know, a great top tip. And we'll come to other top tips at the end. But one of the things, you've got products and stuff like that. But what's still driving you to do all of these sorts of things now? Because obviously it's been 20 years in art, 3 years actually on your own. We've had very difficult kind of 18 months. We'll come on to those at the moment. But what's your why now? Why are you doing all of these things?
You know, it's a good question. I'll touch on briefly what you said earlier, that, you know, sometimes people say mockingly, "Oh, you play." I will tell you that after a long career as a psychologist, um, pretty much everything I do right now does feel like play to me. I don't look at that as the negative. I don't look at that as a minimizing. Um, and I don't mean it in a negative way, because I work really hard. I really do. But there's a pleasure I get because it's, um, you know, I'm exploring, I'm creating. I have these opportunities to, you know, be with color and things like that. It's pretty amazing. I think even the bigger piece of it is the community that surrounds this. I'm not one of those artist types who would prefer to sit at home alone and make art, and that's all I do. I kind of thrive with the community. Um, that's part of the reason why prior to the pandemic I taught in person and I really barely taught online, because I love having a group of creative people with me. Like teaching a class with a group of however many people who are creating, it's fuel, it's energy, it's just so exciting. You see people create, you see them, you know, struggle, but you see them work through the struggle. It's just very, I don't know, I'm very passionate about the community aspect of it. I have a large Facebook community group that I run as well, and I do a lot of collaborative projects. So it's both of those things, the play and the community. And then one other thing, the tangible product. If I design a product, I get to hold it in my hand. If I make a piece of art, I hold it in my hand. Those are all extremely different than my prior career, where as a psychologist, there is no tangible product. You know, your client leaves and you never know how they're doing in the world. It's, you know, I'm not saying I didn't have fun as a psychologist, because there was a lot of fun involved, but it's not play. And although it's about community, it's a one-on-one community. You're intensely with the
Yeah,
client.
yeah.
It's not about this group of people all sort of fueling off each other. So it's just, you know, a different part of life for me now, and it taps into what I love, where I'm at, and yeah, I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah, I must say you do have a massive following, and the community that you're involved in is superb. And I think I resonate that as well. That, you know, when we go to different trade shows and consumer shows, the community feel is brilliant. Um, you know, and it's something that I thrive for, is getting out and networking and connecting with people. And that brings me nicely on to, obviously, the last 18 months have been very difficult, to get out and meet people. And so how's that affected you, and what's been those kind of, well, what's been the biggest challenges over the last 18, 24 months for you?
I guess it's been a lot. I mean, I do feel fortunate that I'm in the position I'm in, where I was able to do what I did. So I definitely wanted to say that, because I know there's a lot of people who struggle in a way that I didn't. Um, being in New York City, that's sort of where the epicenter was initially. So it was very intense in the beginning. And it was a struggle to figure it all out. Not only because, like, literally one day I stopped traveling and I had to cancel a year and a half plus of scheduled events. So there's that. But it was also just, we all lived through it, not knowing what was going to happen. But, in that early time, New York was particularly hit. So, there was the fear. It was just hard to motivate in some ways. But what I did was I really focused on community. And ironically, I had just started that group about 4 months before the beginning of the pandemic. So it was very fresh and people were excited about it because it was new. And what I found quickly was that myself, as well as everybody else, we needed community even more, but there needed to be a new way to do it. So I quickly made the decision that I needed to be online. And so my life literally overnight, like many people, it's changed because I stopped traveling. I mean, I would travel sometimes 20 days a month. I mean, I traveled a lot. So I stopped that and I basically glued myself to the computer, which was great because it was safe and I was able to do that. And I was still able to manage making art and the product design and all of that. But I just decided, you know what, I'm going to start connect with the community. So I started to do demos 3 or 4 times a week. I interviewed other artists. These were all free to everybody. And I think it was really beneficial for me and also for everybody else. So from a business perspective, it was beneficial for me. From a personal perspective, because I remained connected with people who fueled me. And then it was helpful, I think, to the people who are in the community. And it just, honestly, it couldn't have been better. The community is amazing to me. And it just took off over the year doing classes and these demos and all of which I'm still doing because I'm still inside, basically.
Yeah, yeah, but it's good though, isn't it? And we did have a conversation just prior to the interview, and it seems that the work-life balance has kind of changed for you, if you don't mind me saying. Obviously, not having to rush around 20 days a month, and you made a really good point of actually you had time to work on your business, which I think is invaluable for everybody. Has to work on their business rather than just around it and do what they've always done, sort of thing. Um, are you still key to that? Have you noticed that?
Yeah. I mean, I just sort of feel different now. Um, I'm sure many people do for lots of different reasons after this experience. How could you not? I mean, as a psychologist, you don't need
Yeah.
to be a psychologist to know that. Um, but I feel like I want to move forward maybe in a different way, and that in some ways is actually answers one of your earlier questions. Is kind of why is this still exciting for me? Because I think this has sort of opened up things as much as it's closed things. And so for me, I want to move forward. I mean, I really want to get back to travel because I just love traveling. Traveling for me is, if you had a list of all the things that you love to do, some people, might say cooking or gardening. And, for me, it's one of the top is traveling. So I want to do that, but I don't want to do it at the pace that I did before for a couple of reasons. One, because I'm scared. I'll be honest. I am not teaching and traveling yet. I won't be doing that to 2022. And I'm really not sure what to expect in terms of dealing repeatedly with the airlines, the airports, being on the plane, potential issues that might come up with students around the pandemic. But the other thing is I've just grown to really actually like being online. Um, as an artist, I can reach people who I never reached before, people who, not because of the pandemic, but because either they can't afford to travel or they have a family and can't travel, they're not near where I teach, or they have a medical problem and can't travel. All these people have benefited from the fact that many people like me are now online. And so I feel like I want to continue that. So I'm going to blend it, and I don't know, I'm kind of excited about the challenge of figuring out how am I going to make that work?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely a new world, and it's very exciting to have these hybrid. I think there's going to be hybrid shows where
Yeah.
some of it's going to be online and some of it's going to be physical. Because again, we all still very much love the physical, the meet and greet, the networking, the education, the inspiration. You know, I love traveling, and I think we're of the same ilk where you travel and you get inspiration from things that you
Yes.
see and people you meet. So hopefully those things will never go away. But I think you're absolutely right. This opportunity to be online is great. So Seth, my last question for you is before we come on to our last question, a couple of things that you mentioned. You've mentioned it a couple of times now about the business side of things, and you know, as a trade association, you know, I want people to make sure that their businesses are rock solid and steadfast so they can move on to the next level and continue to grow and build their business. And I think sometimes with the creative industry, some people lose sight of the fact that actually, if you want to do well, you have to treat this as a business.
Yes.
How much time would you say that you do the creating to actually focusing doing the business? And I mean the business planning and all of those sorts of things. What kind of percentage is that?
It's really hard for me to give a percentage, but I can easily say that I spend more time on the business than I do on the creative side. The longer I've been doing this, the less time I have to create. And often my obligations to create, when I do create, are related to some of the other things I do, like my product design. So if I'm releasing a new set of stamps, I need to create art that's going to promote the stamps. So sometimes the creating is creating for the, I mean, that's creating, but for me, that's actually a little bit of business because I need to do it with an eye like, this has got to show off the stamp. So creating for myself, I mean, I have my journal and I journal, which is great. And sometimes prior to the pandemic, I was doing these exhibitions so that I could actually feel like I can create for myself, but I'm doing it for sort of a business purpose. But I spend way more time on kind of business planning, social media, just product design, ordering supplies, not to mention the fact that I'm a one-man band. I really am. So, you know, when I get an order in my shop, and my shop is a good, busy shop, so it's never one order. I'm happy about that. But I am picking off the shelf. I'm figuring out where to put it in my New York apartment. I'm putting it in the box. I'm weighing it. I'm putting the postage on, and I'm walking to the post office. So that is part of my life every day, and that is not creative. So yeah, if you want to be, I personally think if you want to be successful, you need to do one of two things. Either you need to learn and figure out and focus on the business side, probably more than you want to. Or you need to be in a position where you have someone who's doing that for you. And even then, I do think it's important that you are your brand. You need to be in it. You know, you can't just hand it all over to somebody if you're in a fortunate position. I don't know many people who are, but let's say you have a spouse who's going to do the business side. You still need to be deeply in the business.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, my last question was going to be, what are your top tips for people that want to come into this industry? And I think you're absolutely right. You've got to be in your business. I think you also got to be front facing. And just as FYI to people that are watching, prior to the video, we started this video, Seth was actually at the post office first thing this morning, I think, delivering stuff. So he is a one-man band, and we all are one-man people actually, with now more so than ever, I think. So I am going to ask you the last question, which is, if people are thinking about getting into the in the industry, they want to be the next Seth Apter, they're looking at you thinking, oh, actually, I could give that a go. What would be your kind of top tips for them?
I think a lot of it touches on things that I've already mentioned. One is that our industry, in my mind, is a very community-based industry. You need to have that connection. For me, I love that connection, so it's easy. Not everybody's like that, but building yourself as part of the community, I think is really important. It's not just sitting alone and making your plan. You want to be connected with the people who are going to, you know, be part of your business. I think 100% you need to be authentic. You need to be your authentic self, good, bad, and ugly. You need to kind of have figured out or be figuring out, because you never really figure it out 100%, your own artistic voice. It's not about saying, oh my God, that guy does really well in that product, I'm going to start designing stamps like him or her. You need to just do yourself and be yourself, and don't get caught up. I used to get caught up a lot in, oh, I'm going to put up a post that's like a real sales oriented post because I need to do that. Or, maybe this is what would sell. And that always fails. It's just, and I've just learned, I'm just who I am, good and bad. And that's what I put out there. And right now in our world, people want authenticity. This is just a different way to live. What I said earlier about have your fingers in many pies, I think that's really, really important. I also think it's really key to be connected closely with either one person or a small group of people. So for example, like find your Craig, and actually Craig can be your Craig, where you have somebody that you can go to ask questions, to get some direction. So you're not just lost in your own insight, because sometimes we get lost in our heads. And to be able to talk it out with a person like you is, to me, really invaluable. I've had my Craigs, and you and I have had conversations before as well. So you've helped me. I think that's really key. Don't assume you know, and don't get lost in your own head. And what you said was really important. Don't forget the business side. Unless you're really lucky, the idea of just being able to sit at home and make art, for example, if that's what you want to do, and somehow that materializing into a career, that happens, but it happens to very few. I don't know anybody. I've read stories that it happens. So you have to also be a little bit realistic, and then recognize too, it's not going to happen overnight. Yes. It's going to be a transition, and you need to plan for that. If you have little kids and you need to support your family, you need to make sure you have other income, or either from you or from somebody else. I just don't think it's realistic to one day say, you know what, no one knows who I am, but tomorrow I'm going to be an artist, so I'm quitting my job. And you know what, there's probably people who take that risk, but and good for you if you do, but be cautious.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I think I had a conversation, and I did a talk a couple of weeks ago about understanding your level of success. And what that meant was, we all want to be Seth Apter, but actually understanding that I might not be able to do the 12 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours a day that you work. I might not be able to have all the seven days a week that you work. I can't do all those sorts of things because I have other considerations. So if I want to be Seth Apter, it's going to take me a heck of a lot longer to get there. But my level of success is actually having enough money to put the food on the table. That's my level of success. Other people's level of success might be that they want to be launching brands, products every single month, every single week, all of those sorts of things. But again, that takes time, effort, and you've got to understand what that is, and understand what commitment that is. Because obviously, Seth, you make it look so easy with all the things that you do, but behind the scenes, you're working like a madman on your own to get all these things done. I think people need to recognise that and applaud you for doing so, and again applaud you for inspiring so many people via your Facebook groups, your lives, your teaching that you've been doing. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your busy day to just chat with me and answer my questions. So Seth, for this interview, I thank you so much for your time. You're an absolute inspiration to a lot of people. Do you have any last words?
I just want to thank you. I really do, because you've been in the industry for a long time, and you're in a position where you have helped so many, and you're so generous with your time and your willingness. So certainly when you asked me, in some ways I'm just paying you back in kind. But I appreciate your longevity and your persistence and your motivation. And again, our community is generally speaking, a great community, and it's people like you, really, because again, you're extremely generous with your advice and your time. And so all I would say is, I'm sure anyone watching knows that already, but I'm just gonna give you a plug and say anybody who doesn't know, Craig is there to help you. He really is. So reach out to him and he'll do his magic.
Oh, Seth, unscripted, but obviously the check will be in the post. Seth, I thank you so much for your time today. If any of you don't know who Seth is, if you want to check out his website, all of his social media links are in the comments below or at the end of this video. Stick around and click on those. But for now, we wish you all a very safe couple of months ahead. And again, Seth, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you everybody watching.